What is up, all of my beautiful freaking people? Welcome back to another episode of FML Talk. I am so excited for today's episode. I am joined by my guest, David Waldy. We are talking all things empathy, being an empath, and how to deal with that crippling fucking anxiety that I know we are all struggling with. So sit back, grab a cocktail, and welcome to FML Talk.
Oh my God. Wait, how old was the other girl?
19. Can you believe that shit?
Hey, this is Gabrielle Stone.
Good book?
He did what? 48 hours?
What a dick.
Yeah, but have you seen all the photos on her Instagram?
And this is FML Talk.
Oh, no, she didn't.
Y'all know I love a good self-love cocktail and occasionally an actual cocktail. I have always notoriously hated the taste of alcohol and needed it disguised in a good mixology cocktail until I discovered Neft. Because Neft is a premium vodka in its purest form with non-GMO rye, it has a light taste full of character. Not only is Neft one of the best tasting vodkas I've ever had, it also comes in the cutest packaging I have ever seen. Their unbreakable barrel keeps it chilled for up to 6 hours, making it the perfect drink to take just about anywhere. Join me in adding a little actual cocktail into your self-love cocktail with Neft vodka. Cheers! Ooh, you guys, this episode, I love when we can bring on men to this show that are vulnerable and have done the work on themselves, and it shows so beautifully. This episode was so amazing for me to sit and listen to David's story, how he realized he was an empath, and the research and the work that he's done on how to not only access those emotions, but really he's so knowledgeable in letting other people know what empaths deal with. I myself am an empath. So it was really beautiful to be able to see that there's ways to exist with this wonderful gift that we all have. He also had some really incredible things to say around anxiety. We all know that is no stranger with me. I deal with anxiety on the daily. And through all the therapy that I've done, through all of the sessions with different people that I've done, I've never had someone explain anxiety to me as clearly as he did and have it resonate and make so much sense on how to really remove yourself from spiraling and get back into touch with where we're at the present moment. So I cannot wait to share this episode with you guys. So let's jump right in. David Waldy, welcome to FML Talk. I'm so excited for this conversation. So thank you for being here.
Gabrielle, I am honored to be here. I'm really excited for this conversation. We're going to have some fun today.
Yes. When I discovered your content, I immediately was so drawn in and was like, oh my God, here is this male that is like really openly and freely talking about being an empath. And I don't see a lot of that out there. So I was so drawn in to the stuff that you were putting out there. So I'm really excited to dig into all that.
Thank you. It's something that has not come without a lot of pain and difficulty, because as a man, especially when I started taking personality tests and strengths finders and different things to learn about myself, I always got empathy as the top. And I was so insecure and almost resentful about it. I was like, this is not a manly characteristic. What the heck? And it wasn't until I fell in love with understanding it as a gift and realizing that it is a beautiful, powerful thing when we can understand it. And especially as a man, it's become something that has been incredibly useful for me in my relationships and my business and everything that I do. And so yeah, I'm really excited about diving into that.
Yeah. So you said, that you started taking all these tests. Was there something that you felt was wrong with you? Like what prompted you to go take these tests?
Yeah. So early on, I've always been obsessed with all things personal development. I'm an avid reader. One of my top strengths is input. And it's, despite when people may think I do like to talk, but input is actually about inputting information. And so a lot of times you'll see that people that like to collect things, whether it's baseball cards, mine is books and reading. I love knowledge. I love information. I'm an obsessive learner. And it's one of those things where if I pick a particular subject, I'm going all in. I'm going to spend, 20, 30, 40 hours just obsessing over that one thing until I feel like I've really got a good handle on it. And so for me, it started off honestly in my teenage years where I really just wanted to understand more and more about who I was. And fortunately, I had some mentors and some leaders that were incredibly helpful in guiding me to learn myself from a very young age so that I could step into different environments and be able to operate in my strengths. Because most often, Gabrielle, one of the things we're taught, we talk about being well-rounded people, right? We live in a society where everyone's talking about being these well-rounded individuals. And I had a mentor of mine who confronted that and said, David, I truly believe that what we need in society today is not well-rounded individuals. It's very sharp, pointed individuals who know their gifts, who know their strengths, who know like the parts of them that are gifts and things to give to other people. And what we need simultaneously is from those people, the humility to surround themselves with other people that have complementary strengths to mitigate your weaknesses. And that's where everything started to change for me.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's incredible advice for anyone that's existing on this planet. So for those that are listening that don't really understand what an empath is, can you give a little insight into really what that means to be an empath?
Yes. So I've done a lot of study and research into this topic, which I was very surprised. It wasn't until I had a couple of videos on TikTok that went pretty controversially viral because there were people on both ends of the spectrum. There's a lot of people that believe that empath is in that nature versus nurture thing, that some people believe that there's certain individuals that are hardwired with specific tendencies towards being more empathic or empathetic, a lot more emotionally intelligent, a lot more in tune with their feelings. Then there's these other side of people that say, no, it comes from nurture and actually environment, that really the reason that we have empaths is because of trauma. And so there was these two conflicting things that really I had to start to dive into. And what's fascinating right now, Gabrielle, is that there's a flood of research that's going into understanding more about the psychological aspects of empaths. And up to date, we know this about science. Everyone believes certain things about whatever it is until science comes along and explains it. And to date, we really don't have a lot of scientific explanation around what makes an empath an empath. And so really most of the research that I've done it's been anecdotal. It's been having conversations with people saying, tell me about your life, tell me your story, tell me your experience. Like, when did you start to notice that you were a little bit different than some of the other people you're around? And so for me, the simplest definition of an empath is someone that has a propensity, or what I would say is kind of an amplified awareness of the emotions and feelings, or even we would often call the vibe of other people. Is that you can be in a situation where you're just in tune. You can walk into an environment and you feel there's even like a spiritual component to it. You walk into an environment and the vibe is off, like the feeling's off, like things are wrong or things are good. You walk in and you feel peace. You feel calm, and you just feel, it's this sense that when you have conversations with many other people, they're like, they don't really get it. Like, what do you mean it like the vibe is off? What do you mean you have a weird feeling about that person? What do you mean that I need to stay away from this individual? What do you mean when you say you're able to read that person? And so I think for our intents and purposes, empath is someone that has just this super strength, I guess you'd say, of being in tune with the emotions and feelings of other people. And the downside to that, though, Gabrielle, is that a lot of times it means that the individual is sometimes more aware of the feelings and thoughts and emotions and stuff going on in other people's lives than they are even their own self. And it can cause a lot of problems.
Yeah, it's almost like they're this sponge that when they walk into a room or a situation and there's water, they're immediately like soaking that in. So any type of emotion, they kind of like end up feeling that at a higher frequency or a higher level than I guess normal people would. I even have a friend, her name is Alex Lynn Ward, shout out girl, who takes on even like physical stuff. So there was one time where she came over to my house and I wasn't feeling good and had a stomach ache. She left my house with a stomach ache that day. So it like on like massive levels like that, people really pick up the energy, and it's almost like adopting some of that. And it becomes really intense to feel like you're picking up somebody else's shit.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where a lot of empaths sometimes get into trouble, is that, and you've probably experienced this too, Gabrielle, in some degree, is that we see that someone's dealing with something, and, you know, we can feel that something's going on, right? The crazy thing about empathy is that all humans, short of having mental illness like narcissistic personality disorder or anything like that, we all have the capacity for empathy. But I usually equate it to something like organization. We all have those friends that are just hardwired to be super like anal retentive organized, and it irritates those of us that are not organized. Like, how are you your life is perfect, everything's perfect, your house is perfect, so organized. And then you have other people that, you know, learn and develop the skill of organization. It's the same thing with empathy. Some people just have kind of like, you know, when God was creating, is like, hey, here's some empathy dust, and it's like he spilled the sprinkler over, and some people just got a bunch of it, right? But it's still a part of every human being, again, short of mental illness. But what I think is so dangerous about it sometimes is that when we can feel and sense the problems that other people are facing, we sometimes forget that it's not always our responsibility to help and fix. It's our responsibility to hold space and be present. And I have found, like, especially in my marriage with my wife, because my wife is not an empath. And so one of the things we found that's so useful in our relationship, when I can sense something's going on and she's very much like, I'm like, hey, babe, is everything okay? Fine. Everything's fine. Obviously, the average person can be like, okay, everything's not really fine. So what's going on? And one thing that I've learned that's useful, it's so useful, is I hold for the moment. I'm saying, hey, I want you to know I'm here. If you want to talk about this, I'm happy to talk about this. I don't know if something's going on or on the side of potentially I'm missing it here. I'm here if you want to chat about it. And then when she does open up, if she opens up and shares with me, what I always do is this is one of my favorite things to ask other people. Are you looking for support, or are you looking for solutions? Because that simple question enables us to know how to interact with that individual. Because a lot of times I'm a fix it guy. I don't know about you, Gabrielle. Like, if I see somebody's got a problem, it's like, just do this and this and this. Let's fix it and move on and get on with our day. And sometimes that's not helpful, right?
No, but I'm so like that too. I'm like, if we're in a fight, it's like, let's sit down and resolve it before we, pass go and collect $200. Like, I need it fixed right now. And I know a lot of other people don't function that way. Yeah. So it's so funny that you say that, because I saw one of your videos that, the worst thing to say to an empath is to be like, I'm fine. It's fine. Nothing's wrong, because you know that there's something wrong. Yeah. And I've had so many, occurrences with my boyfriend where I'm like, hey, what's going on with you? And he's like, nothing, I'm fine. And I'll look at him and be like, just so you know, I know that you're bullshitting me right now. So either we can talk about it now, or I can continually ask you for the next 20 minutes and then you can tell me. It's totally up to you. But either way, you're going to tell me what's going on.
And it's so hard though, because what happens a lot of times, we're unintentionally exposing something that someone else may not want exposed. Like, someone may feel like they've got it together and like they're trying to put on a good face and there's something really bothering them. But on that almost metaphysical, spiritual, emotional level, we can sense that something's going on. And so when we're not gentle and careful in how we approach the situation, it can feel like we're almost outing that person, right? And they're like, how do you know? Like, leave me alone. Like, I'm fine. Like, I should have this, I got it together, right? And so we have to be really careful, I think, in how we approach it. But I'm just like you. I'm like, let's just hash it out. What the heck's going on?
Right. No, but that's so true. People can feel like a little taken off guard. Like, how does this person know that why is my shield not doing its job and covering up with my mask well enough? Yeah. I don't know about you, but I think for me personally, I think I'm an empath, but I think I'm hesitant to lean into it because I feel so much sometimes it scares me. Yeah. Like there's a part of me that wants to fly across the country and go build wells for kids that don't have water and like be with these children that have next to nothing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know that my heart won't handle it. Like it'll feel so much that it's going to explode out of my chest. It's the same feeling when I see the commercials about the fucking animals in the animal shelter with Sarah McLachlan's Arms of the Angels playing. Like I just can't do it. I will go and buy every animal from the pound and like that'll be my life. So do you ever feel like you have to kind of like hold the water behind the dam, or else like the floodgates are going to open and God knows where you're going to end up?
Yeah, you do. It's all about boundaries. I mean, that's the hardest thing for those people that are highly empathic. It's the hardest thing for me, is making sure that, the day and age we live in, we talk a lot about self-love and self-care and personal development, which are all beautiful, important things. But the problem with most empaths is that they have this tremendous dissatisfaction with their life, because what we create are these things that I heard about in a book one time that are called these like covert contracts. And these covert contracts is where we're constantly giving and loving and serving and supporting and pouring out, and we'll be there if you call, like if you need us, if there's a problem, like if there's pain, if there's difficulty. We're the person that to some degree or another, we feel this obligation to go support and help, because we have this thought in our mind, well, if I don't, no one else will. And so we take on this type of responsibility that isn't necessarily our responsibility. But here's where it gets really muddy, is that sometimes it is our responsibility, but if we don't have the self-awareness and the ability to regulate and manage our emotions and understand the effects of what happens when we do fly across the country and we're going to go do something because it's been pulling on our heart, if we don't have the right things in place, what it can do is it's going to emotionally derail us. We'll end up like crying in a pool for 2 weeks, like wondering, why in the world is my life so amazing? I don't deserve any of this. And we have this comparison thing where when we talk about comparison, a lot of times we talk about it, we're comparing to people that maybe have more than us or better off than us, a better relationship, a bigger house, a better car. But empaths often do the opposite. They look at people with less than them and they start living a life full of guilt and shame, of being like, I can't enjoy any of my life, because think about those people that don't have anything, those people that are struggling, that just like you said, the Sarah McLachlan commercial, all those puppies, like, give me all the puppies.
Yeah.
And so I think what's really important is really, it's listening and trusting those things that are pulling on your heart, but at the same time, knowing, developing this awareness with the boundaries that you have of saying, okay, there's sometimes I do have to say no. There's sometimes that maybe I have to love from a distance, right? We all have those friends or those people that we, maybe not necessarily friends, but those, I call them energy vampires, right? Those emotional vampires where you love them, but you can only handle so much before you just like, you're with them and it's all about them and woe is me and my life sucks and it's all the problems in the government and the news and all this stuff. And what we have to do, I think, a lot of times is create these boundaries and to love and support from a distance. But when we talk about our most intimate relationships, those closest to us, it very much comes down to, I think, healthy communication and helping people understand that, yeah, I might be a little bit different than you. And it might be strange that if we go and we have a big family gathering and we're with your in-laws for 2 or 3 days, that when we get home, I need a day to go sit on a mountain by myself. And
right.
That might not make sense to some people. So I think with communication with those closest to us, it frees us while we simultaneously develop some very simple strategies for managing our emotions, protecting our energy, and being aware, self-aware enough to really put ourselves first in a healthy way. Because if we don't put ourselves first in a healthy way, we end up being not the best version of ourselves for the very people that we want to be the best version of ourselves for.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think as an empath, it's been harder for you to set or enforce boundaries
100%.
because you don't want to hurt someone else's feelings?
100%, because I've seen this, again, this is somewhat anecdotal, but I don't think I've had a single conversation with someone that is highly empathic or considers themselves an empath that doesn't have a chronic fear of being misunderstood, mislabeled, and misjudged. And when we say no, it's almost like ripping a part of our heart out because we love the person and we want to. It's like it's a war inside, right? Especially with those that are nearest and dearest to us. When we say no, what we're actually doing is we're helping people. We're training behavior. And most often, if you are highly empathic or an empath and you haven't enforced any type of boundaries and said, I'm okay with this, I'm not okay with this, this is fine, this is not fine, those people around us have developed what they would consider to be acceptable behavior around Gabrielle, acceptable behavior around David, like what they'll tolerate. And they push and push and push. And sometimes we're not even fully aware that we don't even have any boundaries. And we wonder why we're exhausted all the time. We wonder why we're emotionally drained all the time. We wonder why does no one ever give the same amount that I do? Why is it always I'm the person giving and loving and I never get anything back? And it's simply because we're fearful of that misunderstanding of being misunderstood, but we're also terrified of being construed or mislabeled or misjudged as selfish. We're not intrinsically selfish people. And so the appearance of us being selfish by saying no kind of terrifies us.
Yeah. And I think I don't even know if that's just for empaths. I think that's for a big spectrum of people. Like the fear of saying no and standing up for yourself and enforcing a boundary because you're protecting your own peace to the outside could look like they're a bitch, they're an asshole, like they're being too strict with me, or why are they, acting this way? So I think there's a lot of people would resonate with that and be afraid of doing stuff like that, especially if it's not the norm in how they normally are used to acting.
Right. And when we start to do that, though, and we practice like just small things, and especially in your closest relationships, it tends to be easier if you have open communication. But what we start to do is we start the process of behavioral modification. You start training them, the people around you, what's okay and what's not okay. And it doesn't take that long before they realize, oh, okay, it is not okay for me to do X, Y, and Z. Gabrielle is not cool with that. And unfortunately, there might be some initial, I'm a little offended or I'm a little upset, but you have to love them and yourself enough, right? We all have to do that, because then it retrains their behavior and it allows you to have a more deeper connected relationship, which is really what we're looking for in the first place.
Yeah, 100%. So you did a video that caught my attention that was around resolving conflict and really like validating someone when they feel misunderstood. Yeah. And it wasn't just for empaths. This was for like any couple out there, or not even a couple, like any relationship dynamic that has some strain out there. Yeah. This was so well put for people to realize like the difference of how to say something to someone to make them not hear you and how to say it in a way that they can hear you. So can you talk a little bit about that specifically? Because I think there was a lot of really great stuff in there.
Yeah, you might have to refresh my memory a little bit on specifically what I said, but I think I do remember that video. That was a fun one to make. And what happens is a lot of times when we upset someone or we're offended, like someone feels offended by the things that we do, there's hurt, right? We feel hurt. We all feel hurt because of different things. And oftentimes, early in my marriage, one of the things that my wife had to work through was if I would say something that would hurt her and she would come back and say, this is how you made me feel, right? I was very much like, well, that's your problem. I didn't mean to make you feel that way. And it turned into like this mini gaslighting thing, right? It's like, you shouldn't feel that way. That's not your reality. When really that was.
Right. Yeah. Or someone saying like, I'm sorry you feel that way, but, and it's like, no, that doesn't really like acknowledge what's going on in here.
Yeah. And I think that it's this humility that says, okay, if someone is bringing someone you love, like this is, a lot of this is contextual, right? If you've got haters on the internet or people that you don't really have a relationship with, there's not real connection. Some of these things don't necessarily apply. But if it's a real relationship that is someone close to you, I talk about this concept called fear sympathy. And it's this process. We do everything we can to fully see, hear, and understand from their perspective. We take a beat, we take a breath. We're like, okay, if I was really in their shoes, right? This is like a proactive form of empathy. If I was in their shoes and that happened, and I could see, hear, and understand from their perspective, how would I be feeling in this moment? And when we take just a moment, right? Mel Robbins teaches this about, the 5 seconds. We just do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it's a beautiful thing where if we do that and we just stop, the fear side is where we stand strong in our truth, whatever you want to call it. We stand true in what we believe, but we're able to convey to them, hey, I don't fully understand, but I love you and I care about you enough to step back for a moment and try and understand from your perspective and really be willing to listen. And sometimes that means that in that moment, that conversation maybe can't happen. Like, I know you're upset at me right now. I know that you're frustrated or you're hurt. And if now is not the time for this conversation, I don't want to sweep this under the rug. Can we set some time tonight after dinner or tomorrow morning or whenever that we can talk about this? Because the last thing I ever want to do is hurt you or offend you or upset you. But it's got to be through that open communication. I think when we can validate to some degree just the reality that someone is feeling something, it doesn't mean we're justifying it. It doesn't mean that we're okay with it. It doesn't mean we're like, oh yeah, whatever. It's saying, okay, I see that you feel this way. I don't understand it, but I see that you feel this way and I do want to understand. I want to understand because I want to be deeper connected to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes all we need is for that other person to acknowledge what we're going through, even if at the moment they're not ready to apologize or give us a reason. The simple fact of them listening to us and hearing us out and being like, okay, I acknowledge that that's what's happening and that this is what you're going through. And that's sometimes enough, like before the apology stage even gets there.
It is, because a lot of times when we're in these heightened emotional situations, it's actually not ideal to work it out in that moment. And that's hard for some of us that are the fixers. So like, let's just talk it out, fix it, and move on, right? There are people, like my wife, for example, she's a processor. She's very intentional with how she speaks and what she says. And sometimes, like, that was one of the hardest things when we first got married, was recognizing, like, I want to fix this right now. And she's like, I need a minute. Like, let's separate for a few. I'm going to go cool off. You cool off. And then we'll circle back to the table and talk about this. And I think when we can de-escalate that emotion, it allows us to really understand more from their perspective. Because again, it's really about, even if you don't agree with it, that's the key. You might not agree with it. They might be wrong. They might be 100% wrong. But the key is understanding. And the key is creating open communication, that you have to value the relationship over the facts in that moment. And that's why stepping back for a second and saying, okay, I love you enough. I love you so much that I'm willing to step aside and say, okay, I understand that I don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, I feel like people listening, it's the same as when Tay and I, my boyfriend and I, get on and do an episode and we talk about like open communication. Like, communication is like the root of everything. And people are like, okay, great. But how do I make my partner do that? Because I know there's so many people out there that are like, okay, I hear this and I know that that's what I want to work towards, but how do I make my partner get on board with that or start to understand that? And I think it's difficult for a lot of women because, unfortunately, a lot of times it's the man in the relationship that doesn't want to have those emotions more available or show that vulnerability. And we do so much on this show to bring on the opposite type of men like yourself and my boyfriend that really show how great it is when men can be vulnerable. But I know that people get frustrated because they're like, okay, I get that that's what we should do, but how do I get my partner to do that?
I will say that, I love that you mentioned the communication piece. It requires it's kind of like a secret mission. Right? It's this thing that's not really scheduled or planned. It's like when all defenses are down, right? When everything is calm and when you're able to just like lean over, maybe you're cuddling on the couch or whatever, you say, hey, can I talk to you about something that is really important to me, right? And you say, I just need you to know that there's situations sometimes where I feel like I'm trying to tell you what's going on, and I'm trying to talk to you about my day or my frustrations or my issues or and it might not even be pertaining to the spouse or the partner. Maybe it's stuff that happened at work, right? And there's a lot of times where I feel like in that moment, what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to be connected to you. And what it feels like happens in that moment, maybe you think that I'm looking for you to try and fix something. And I just want you to be aware that a lot of times when I'm sharing those things with you, what would be really helpful is if instead of jumping to try and fix all my problems, is to maybe ask me if you could help me by asking, all right, babe, are you looking for support right now? Do you just need me to listen? You just need me here present with you? Or are you looking for solutions? Because if you're looking for solutions, I'd be happy to give those. And so it's that type of conversation, but it's also the type of conversation where, and these are hard and they're tough conversations. And it's really, you have to be very strategic about the timing and when this happens. Don't do it in a fight. I'll tell you that. Don't do it in a fight. But
Yeah.
if you can have another part to that conversation is saying, hey, when I'm expressing to you how I'm feeling and what's going on, I'm not asking for you to agree with me. I'm not asking for you to say that I'm right, that I'm wrong. All I'm asking is for you to understand my reality in that moment is I am feeling this. I could be completely misguided off. It could be like right or wrong. I'm not in that moment trying to win. I'm just trying to tell you how I feel, and what I need from you, if you can help me with this, is simply acknowledge and validate the fact that I am feeling this, right? I'm not asking you to agree. I'm not asking for you to understand. I'm just asking for you to hear my heart and listen to me. And you're right, Gabrielle. I mean, it is something that if you can't create that type of conversation with your partner, the challenge is that you're going to live in this perpetual state of dissatisfaction and frustration, feeling like your needs aren't met. And one of two things needs to happen. Either you need to seriously reconsider the relationship, or you need to find a mediator. You need to find somebody that can help you navigate that with your partner, because you have two very different paradigms. You've got two different people that see the world completely different and usually are opposite in a number of things. And instead of fighting against each other, it's recognizing what we talked about at the beginning, is looking at our gifts and our skill sets and finding someone that has complementary ones that can mitigate our weaknesses and coming together to make something even more extraordinary than what we would do by ourselves.
Yes. And I talk all the time about how therapy is such a gift and such a tool for people to have.
Yes.
My non-negotiables for even starting a relationship is like, is someone open to going to therapy, and do they know how to communicate? Like if those two things aren't there, there's no relationship. So
Yeah.
I don't know how people, who are in these long-term relationships or marriages deal with someone that doesn't know how to sit down and have a conversation and hear your perspective and communicate with you in that type of way. It must be absolutely exhausting.
It is. And it's one of those things that you see it all the time, is that when you know this from your story and your background, is that hindsight's 20/20, right? Is that we can look back and we see the things and we're like, oh, I missed that. Okay. Well, here we go. And I think in relationships, they're the most difficult thing I think that we can do on this planet, but simultaneously they have the potential to be the most rewarding. And a lot of people, unfortunately, get to this place in life where they just throw their hands up and they're like, whatever, I'm just going to cohabitate, and, or you get a divorce and you separate or whatever. And it's not always a black and white thing, right? It's not just, it's very, very challenging. And we're all human beings who have these feelings and emotions and things that are really difficult to navigate. But if you've been stuck in it, for anyone listening that's maybe been in a relationship where your partner's not listening to you, your partner's not open to therapy, your partner is really, it's not something that is working, I mean, you've got to exhaust every resource to try and get them to someone or something or some situation where you can reconcile and have open dialogue. And it's not going to be a 1 hour session and like, oh yeah, our life is fixed. It's going to take work. And I think that it's really, I don't really know if I have an answer for that, Gabrielle, because it's so incredibly hard. And my heart breaks for people like that. I know so many people that are like that, where they've just given up in the relationship and they're like, well, we got the kids, so I guess we're going to tough this thing out till the kids graduate or whatever. And
yeah, I've heard so many stories like that too. And people are just like, well, I want to stay together for my kids. And I'm like, look, guys, if you're not happy in the relationship, the kids are picking up on that energetically. Like you're not doing them a service by staying unhappy in your situation. And I think so many people settle and be like, well, this is good enough. If I had to start over, what am I going to find then? But life is too long and too short to stay unhappy and to settle with things like that, in my perspective.
What I have found is really useful, though, we go back to boundaries, is that when you start stepping into your power and you're becoming more self-aware and you are really, honestly, a lot of it starts with internal love for ourselves. Like when you become your own best friend and you really focus on loving yourself, honoring yourself, respecting yourself, keeping your word to yourself, operating in integrity, those are things that energetically, like there are people that get around you, they don't have a choice but to have that energy bouncing off of them. And I've seen in situations where if it's a spouse situation or a partnership situation, that what happens that person is constantly confronted by this beautiful flow of energy that either they separate themselves, like they remove themselves, or they change, they start to change. And when you can enforce those boundaries, again, it's just behavioral modification. I've seen this with so many people that when you do that and you start saying no, and this is what's acceptable, and like, I'm not going to allow this to continue this way, that sometimes is the come to Jesus wake up moment that people need. And they're like, oh, wow, I need to get my act together. Okay. Like, you're serious. I'm like, yes, I'm serious. Like, I love you. I care about you, but this can't happen. This is not going to happen anymore. I'm not going to live this way. Either we're going to have tough conversations and we're going to have to go see someone that can help us work through these things together, or or something worse is going to have to happen, because I'm not going to live like this anymore. And I think sometimes when we're willing to be bold and courageous and enforcing those things, still doing our best to not be attacking them, but in love, because we, at one point or another, we were in love with them, right? We loved them. If we're willing to step back into that and say, I'm willing to speak the hard truth in love, that sometimes is just what it takes for them to have that wake up call and be like, whoa, I got to stop playing games. Like, I love this person. I don't want this to go that way.
Yeah. And I think that you have to be ready on the other end to, if that wake up call doesn't come and if the boundaries aren't starting to be respected, you have to enforce them, because boundaries without having you enforce them don't mean shit. All that's going to do is have people be like, oh, okay, cool. That's a boundary, but like nothing happened if I cross it. So let's cross it again. Like it's not going to service you. So you have to be committed enough to like following through with whatever consequence that is.
Absolutely. It takes courage. It really takes a lot of courage. And that's what part of, to me, what integrity is are we keeping our word to ourselves, the commitments we've made to ourselves? And are we, it's not just like in our health and nutrition. It's like, no, and really the person that you want to be and the person that you want to become, the commitments you've made to yourself and the philosophy and ideology and the beliefs and your spiritual, all of those things, that version of you that you want to become, in order to create alignment and actively take the steps to manifest the life that you want to have, you have to enforce the boundaries. And that takes courage. It takes immense courage because there's risk involved. And there's Brene Brown talks about this a lot, is that there's no such thing as courage without risk and vulnerability. You're going to have to be vulnerable.
That's right.
If you're going to have that type of conversation. But that's where, the gold often lies. Sometimes it doesn't, but a lot of times it does, because we're courageous.
Yes. Ooh, yes. I just got chills. So with being an empath and any like living, breathing organism, in my opinion, comes
Yeah.
anxiety. And you talk a lot about anxiety and some kind of like tips and tricks of how to deal with that. Can you share a little bit on that? Because I know a lot of my listeners, as well as myself, struggle with just random anxiety that comes up to like bite us in the ass on a day-to-day basis.
It does. I found that without fail, anxiety's origin is because we are living in our heads in non-existent time. And I'll elaborate.
Please.
What happens is we talk about worry and fear and anxiety and all these things. We're all constantly crafting this narrative in our head, a story of our lives. We're the writer, right? We're the author of this story that we're writing. And what happens is that if we remove ourselves from the present moment because we're thinking about a future that does not exist yet, we start to tap into this thing that's our negativity bias. And what happens is we're constantly thinking about all of the potential things that could happen, and rarely, if ever, are they good. There's these things we're living in non-existent, and that's why where a lot of guilt and shame comes from is the opposite side, is the past. We're living in our heads in the past in regret and wishing I should have done that, or if I would have known this, I would have done that, or I would have made that change, right? It's that hindsight 2020 thing, is that's where a lot of this guilt and shame comes from. But the same thing is true for anxiety, fear, and worry, is because we are removing ourselves from this present moment, and we're thinking about all the contingencies and the different scenarios of what could happen in this relationship, what could happen in my job, what could happen on the way home, what could happen to my daughter, what could happen to my son, what could happen to my mom, what could happen to, in any situation, with my financial situation, with the stock market, with the war, like with our president, like all of this stuff. The reason we have these influxes of, and I think why anxiety is so prevalent today is that we have lost the art of being present. We've so lost this art of like right here and now, like nothing else exists but me and Gabrielle right now. Like I love my kids, I love my wife, I love my life, I love all the stuff. But right now, this is all we got. Like this is it. And when people listen to it, in this moment is all you really have, because the next moment you could be dead. It's the reality. And what happens is we start to think about, through a wrong frame, we're like fearful, like, well, I'm going to die, or something's going to happen and I'm going to lose all my money, or I'm going to lose my job. That's where this anxiety slips in. And so what happens is we are taking an emotion from non-existent time, pulling it into our present and making our present tense.
Oh my God, I've never had it explained to me like that. And I've had so many discussions with different therapists about my own anxiety, and that resonates so much with me. I've never had it explained like that. So what do you feel is a good, tip for when people start going down that rabbit hole or feeling that anxiety? Is there something that you do personally that brings you back to that present moment?
Yeah, because I mean, it pops its head up all the time, right? It's not one of those things that it's like a one and done fix it. We have to regularly practice these things, just like we have to regularly exercise. We need to regularly take care of nutrition and all that. Consistency is everything, right? The best tool that I have found is this thing I call moment stacking. And where you can bring in all this stuff around mindfulness and breathing and meditation. And all these things are useful, right? All of these things are useful. Different things work for different people. But the most useful thing that I found for me is recognizing the physiological effects of breath work in conjunction with shifting our perspective to the present moment. So what I'll do is I'll take 60 seconds, and it's the very simple 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out. So in this moment, I'm okay. And I'll do that for about a minute. And what's crazy is I just got goosebumps doing it right there. I'm just as an example, it's like what happens is we literally have a physiological change, like our blood pressure, like our everything to do with cortisol and dopamine, the release of all the neurological stuff that's going on in our brains. That's why when we talk with our kids, for anyone that has kids, if your kids are wired up, you look at them, you're like, take a breath. It's okay. There's a reason we say take a breath. It is the only thing that we have that is a physical or physiological control of this heightened emotional anxious state. And so for me, every time because sometimes, again, and this is just a sidebar, Gabrielle, sometimes the anxiety comes and we don't know why. Like, we're just like, I just feel anxious.
Yo, all the time, not sometimes, all the time.
So it's easy when we can identify where we're living in that non-existent time. But what I found is that the same is true for when we can't identify where the anxiety is coming from, is that all that happens in that moment is that our brain is on overdrive trying to figure out, like, fight or flight, where are the threats, what the heck is going on. Our body is just having a physiological response. And a lot of that obviously can come from trauma and past experiences. And for people that, have gone through hard things, it can be an environment, it can be a smell, it can be a sound from a show. There's things that we're not even conscious of that can trigger stuff in a moment. And that's where a lot of times that anxiety just pops up. And what I found is still true is that if we can just anchor to the moment, because like right now, like in this moment, as whoever's listening to this, like in this moment, the reality is, despite all the problems, your pain and difficulties and financial, whatever, job, all the stuff, in this moment, you're okay. And if you can just repeat that to yourself over and over for just like 30 seconds or 60 seconds, it's enough to disrupt that pattern. It's really what it is this pattern. And you're like, okay, I am okay. Everything is okay. I'm okay. Okay. And you just breathe and you just ground yourself back to that present moment. And when we can live in the present, that is where true peace, joy, fulfillment, contentment, all those things that we're desperately craving for, that so many people are chasing, right? They're so forward. I'm going to get the peace. I'm going to get the joy. I'm going to get the happiness. I'm going to get the money. I'm going to get there. And I feel like so many of us, I don't know that there's anyone to blame, but we've missed the fact that we have access right now to so much more than we realize. And all that we have to do is focus on being in the present moment.
Yeah. Oh my God. There's so much truth to that. And I've been one of those people that has fallen into the habit of like, well, if I can just get to this milestone, then like it'll be really great and I'll be happy. Or if I could just get to this vacation, then like I'll be able to relax and have some peace. And you miss a ton of the stuff that you're going on in your day-to-day life that could be bringing you so much happiness, that could be bringing you so much peace. And when you can remember to drop back into your heart center and be like, okay, I'm just gonna be in the here and now and enjoy that. It's a really powerful thing. I've been this past month, especially, really working on consciously doing that, because it's something you need to retrain yourself how to do, because that's not how we are programmed in today's society. We're, told to like look for the future and figure out what's coming next. And, all of these different outside factors that are supposed to weigh in on our happiness and our goals and our dreams and our life. And it's about coming back to that present moment and really like refocusing there.
Yeah. And one of the things I talk about a lot is one of my taglines is never stop becoming. And sometimes I've found that there's been some confusion around that, because when we talk about becoming, it's almost like this thing that's inaccessible, right? It's like, well, I'm becoming that thing that's out there, that version of me one day. But what I found that is so useful in this context, so when we talk about anxiety, we talk about stress, we talk about just being present in the moment and really enjoying and loving life, is, everyone talks a lot, it's this buzzwords now, visualization, manifestation, affirmations, all these different things, which are, again, great, useful things. But what I have found is absolutely life-changing is when you can create the habit and practice of when you wake up in the morning, you look yourself in the mirror, you bring yourself to the place where you can say, I love you, I see you, and I believe in you. And you can focus on that version of you that you want to become. And every single day, you align your actions, your feelings, your choices, your decisions, all of that with that version of you. You will literally step into it every single day instead of waiting to get there, right? You step into that. It's like, okay, this is the partner that I want to be. This is the friend that I want to be. This is the entrepreneur that I want to be. This is the podcast host that I want to be. This is whatever, right? And people are saying, well, I got to work to get there. Like, no, we actually don't. We have the creative power to visualize that version of ourselves and say, no, this is who I'm going to decide to be today. And that's where this beautiful thing, I actually learned this from my daughter when she was pretending to be a little chef. When she pretends to make food in her little play kitchen, she's a chef. And if you tell her otherwise, she'll slap you. She's like, I know, I'm a chef, right?
Yeah.
She's like,
yes, sir.
If we could just recognize the power of what kids use in their imagination and pretending, is like, we've lost that as adults. So many of us, is that we don't tap into our imagination and allow ourselves to be like, no, this is who I'm going to be today. And these are the decisions I'm going to make, but I'm also going to carry grace for myself. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm not going to be perfect. That's where we start to let go of these things that really, really terrorize us, of the pressures to perform and the expectations of others and having to measure up and comparison. And we start to take simple things like we're talking on a Zoom across the United States in real time with real video. And these moments where we take a sip of water, where we walk outside and we touch the grass, like when we can anchor back regularly to that present moment, like life just changes. And for all the people that say, well, I don't know, I've got much to be grateful for, I got all these problems. It's just a shift in our perspective, a shift in our mindset. It's what we focus on.
Yeah, big time. And that's such a huge gift if people really decide to take action with it and shift that perspective. Like, your entire life can change. And I wholeheartedly believe that. David, this has been so freaking amazing. You are wonderful. I mean this as the highest compliment. I can tell you're a motivational speaker. Like, you've just been wonderful.
Thank you.
Can you tell everybody where they can follow you, where they can find more of your stuff to keep up with what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So anywhere on social media at David Waldy. I'm on every platform. YouTube, I've got to get the YouTubes going. I have a channel there, but really TikTok, Instagram, if you want to connect with me direct, shoot me a DM on Instagram. And also have something I love to give away for free to people that listen to podcasts. It's called the Fierce Sympathy Framework. And it was something I developed specifically for those that are in a coaching context, but I found it to be absolutely instrumental for self-coaching as well, where if you are serious about making transformational change, of learning to love yourself and creating these boundaries and defining goals, if you actually go to Fierce Empathy Framework, so fierceempathyframework.com, it's a free download. You can download it and work through it. It's like a 50-page ebook that you can work through, that I have found to be, it's completely changed my life, Gabrielle. And so anyone that listens, I'd love to give that to you for free.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Well, thank you. And I'll be taking you up on that as well, because that's incredible. And I can't wait to work through that myself. David, thank you so much. I really appreciate all of your knowledge and your vulnerability. So thank you for coming on today.
Gabrielle, thank you for having me. I so appreciate your time.
I want to thank David so much for coming on FML Talk today and having that incredible discussion with us. We are going to take a turn now and jump into some of your FML stories. Here's number one.
Hey Gabrielle, my name is Ty. I have been through a sociopath and a psychopath both in just the last few years. I caught my husband in lie after lie after lie, almost always involving other women or stealing or partying. When I caught him in that final lie, I asked him why he was treating me like I was disposable. He replied, "You've earned the title of disposable." Fuck that. I filed for divorce the very next day. Then I found out about multiple affairs and orgies he'd had while we were together. So I destroyed the shit out of my wedding dress and had a really fucking epic photo shoot done. About a year later, I met and started dating the hottest dude I've ever seen. But just 2 months into the relationship, I learned that he had a felony conviction for aggravated assault, domestic violence. He told me that, his ex made it all up and that she was crazy, as most narcissists do. But it didn't take long for me to start experiencing his rage, temper, and the abuse myself. So I spent 3 months trying to escape. I ended up moving across the country, But then he followed me those 800 miles to physically abuse me again inside my own home, then stalk me and harass me. So I filed criminal charges. I was issued a protection order. And then I moved across the fucking country, yes, once again, to start over. Reading your books have inspired me in so many ways. I have been in a relationship with myself for almost a year now. I've learned to love myself the same way that I love others. I control my thoughts better. I've been challenging my core beliefs. And I'm like more than just okay alone, but fucking seriously happy and single on purpose. I'm even traveling solo to other countries and loving life. I was tired of being told you won't, you can't, you shouldn't, like you won't leave me, and you can't be happy single, or you shouldn't travel solo. I just finally said, fuck you, watch this, and then I wrote a fucking book, appropriately titled, Fuck You, Watch This.
Oh my God, I love it. I was like, fuck, please let this journey have a happy ending. I don't know what's worse, the sociopathic husband having orgies while you're fucking married, or a convicted felon that follows you across the fucking country. You have paid your dues, girl. I am glad that you are fucking happy and thriving now, as you should be. And congrats on writing a book, girl. So proud of you. Sending you all my love. Here is story number 2.
Hey, Gabrielle. So I want to tell you a bit about what happened between me and my ex. It's a long story. I know I have to keep it short, so I decided to tell you about the main things that happened during the breakup and that led towards the breakup. So the first thing that happened was that one night we were at my friend's house and he was being really passive-aggressive to me in front of everyone and made me feel really shitty. And when we got home, all I wanted to do was talk about it, and he completely ignored me to the point where I was crying next to him in the same room for like 30 minutes, and all he did was ignore me and get ready for bed and just literally told me that he doesn't want to talk to me because his sleep was more important. The second thing that happened was that, he basically has this friend, that one friend that encourages you to live your life and to sleep around, because apparently that's the most manly thing you can do. And during the actual breakup, I had his phone in my hands and it was really messy. Like, the breakup was super messy, and I saw a bunch of the messages this guy had sent him, and he basically told him like a bunch of times that he should break up with me because I'm not worth it. And at the same time, I also found out that he had been flirting with this girl on his social media while he had a profile picture with me on it. And at the same time he was flirting with her, he was telling me to fuck off. And every time I would send him a message, he just kind of told me that he couldn't reply to it because I was a spam folder. And to top that all off, because that obviously wasn't enough, I also found out that he had been screen recording me while we were FaceTiming and we were fighting about something. Or I was just upset about something. I also saw some recordings where I was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. And I want to emphasize, really, I had no idea I was being recorded. He just screen recorded me like almost every time we were talking, which was really upsetting. So yeah, thank you for sharing my story. I'm really curious to hear about what you have to say about this. So yeah, thank you, Gabrielle.
Okay, first of all, that's fucking creepy. Like, who just screen records their significant other when they're having random FaceTime calls? But the thing that really bothered me the most in this story is when you said you were sitting in the same room as him, crying, and nothing was being done. I will never understand when you're in a partnership and a significant other isn't affected by your tears. Or the fact that you are obviously hurting about something, whether they agree with it or not. The fact that you're upset and you're hurting should matter and should make a difference to them. And it is a clear indication of when you need to get the fuck out of a relationship, when someone is not respecting your feelings in that way or trying to make you feel better or rectify the problem. So I am glad you are out of that, girl. As always, make sure you guys are subscribed so you never miss an episode. Keep up with us on Instagram at FML Talk Podcast for all of our giveaways and behind the scenes goodies. If you are not watching us on YouTube, you can check us out on youtube.com/FML Talk to see all the interviews happen live in studio. And as always, have a self-love cocktail on me. Cheers, guys.